They're not documenting it correctly.
So you don't know exactly what was done?
Not exactly, no.
You don't know what was there and what's not anymore or
No.
anything?
And so that's another part of like the trauma surrounding being intersex.
This is medical malpractice? Absolutely yes. But from what I hear about surgery when it comes to intersex infants, intersex kids, surgeries that are done without their consent, and in this instance, without even proper medical documenting, it's not good. Which is interesting because those same right-wingers are currently on a crusade, you know, sitting in their padded cell, surrounded by trans flags, like that meme of Miss Puff, focusing on the genitalia of children to an absurd and insane degree. Talking about, oh my god, they're mutilating and castrating kids, which is not happening. Like, for some reason, conservatives don't have the same energy for intersex kids having these surgeries done to them without their consent, which are not medically necessary. So like a month or two ago, I saw this video that was uploaded, and then I got distracted, and we talked about some other nonsense for a while, and I never ended up watching the video. So today, I know you've all been waiting with bated breath for Anthony Padilla's I Spent a Day with Intersex People, because we talk about intersex people every now and again on this channel. They kind of blow a hole into the idea of the human species having a rigid gender binary, even though any actual biologist out there would tell you that there's a lot of commingling going on. It's not very rigid of a binary. It's not very black and white when it comes to biology. It's actually a lot of crazy stuff that can happen because human beings, contrary to popular belief, are not robots that have been designed. They are biological, I guess you could say. It's just evolution, which any rational person will be able to, with a middle school education, tell you. It's not perfect. You know, it selects for things, but it doesn't do everything correctly. That's why sometimes you get a person who's got the XY chromosomes, but then they find out that they would actually be liking to not be pigeonholed into the societal expectation for people with XY chromosomes, and they go a different way. You know, and then sometimes there are people that are born with XXY, that are born with all kinds of crazy stuff going on that you don't know anything about, and would never know anything about looking at the person, and that's how you get intersex people, or something like that. So let's learn. Let's find out. Anthony Padilla, I spent a day with internet people, intersex people, poggers. Oh, also, I'm sick. It's not the vid. Do not worry. I have like a sore throat and I'm a little eepy. So if my voice falls apart, or if I do, or if I feel like I'm a little incoherent currently, because I absolutely am, that's why.
Intersex.
Hello.
What do you think you would do if you found out during puberty that you weren't exactly male or female? Or if you found out that doctors surgically altered your body when you were born and your parents hid it from you until you were 18?
Which is messed up. That happens a lot too. So obviously with intersex people, this is a thing that you hear about all the time. When an intersex person is born, usually the doctors and the parents will be like, okay, what are we going to do about this? And oftentimes that involves like genital surgeries in order to try to make that person match up more to one of the two binary, gender options or sex options, male or female. It's not consensual. If you're using Republican framing, it is absolutely genital mutilation of children, literal infants, and it's not good, right? It's not great. You'd rather the person be able to consent to such a thing. And I don't know that there's any actual medical reason to do that. It's usually societal. We have to have this rigid gender binary. You know, your kid has to be a boy or a girl. So we're going to have to try to make a change here to make that happen. And oftentimes, this leads to a lot of unfortunate experiences for that intersex person as they grow older. Quite cringe. Also, circumcision is another thing that not that great to do to kids. There's a lot of cultural reasons for it, but there's no actual scientific reason to do it. The main thing people will talk about with circumcision, which is not natural, people are born with foreskins, the main thing would be like hygiene concerns. But if you know how to wash yourself, it's not a problem. It's not. Now, the only time that it might be beneficial to do this is like if you're in a country that doesn't have access to regular bathing or something. But in the current moment, ideally throughout the world, there are places like that. But at least in the United States, where this happens a lot, that's not really a concern. Certainly shouldn't be a concern, even though there are people that go without bathing, whatnot. You know what I'm talking about. It's very dumb. And that's also genital mutilation that is done without the consent of the child and is often decided on by the parents. And you'll not see any Republicans or conservatives mad about that. In fact, they'll usually advocate for it because they're weird.
Hello, Hayden.
Hey.
Aiden.
Hello, Maria.
Hi.
Maria.
You are intersex.
Correct.
Do you start a lot of conversations like that?
I did used to get, in my younger years, are you a boy or a girl? And that was the intro before.
Classic.
What
I
is-
actually got that all the time too. Not because I'm well, actually, I don't know if I'm intersex. I'm sure it's entirely possible, but I feel like I might know by now. I don't actually know. I've not gotten my chromosomes tested, nor have most people. But I used to get it all the time because I used to wear my hair long. I still do, but like way back in the day when I was a kid, I'd be wearing my hair longer because I liked it. And I would constantly be mistaken for a girl. And also, like, I don't know, I question myself about that as well. Because, like, my genetics are probably the main thing, but, like, I'm not a very hairy person at all, thank God, as an AMAB person. And it just makes me wonder. Because, like, I don't have low T. Before I was on HRT, my testosterone levels were at the middle of the standard range when I got them tested before going on HRT. The middle of the standard range. Like average, not too high, not too low. I always thought I was low T, but evidently not. And I think my estrogen levels were also standard for a male, right? So it makes me wonder if like my body is just like more susceptible to estrogen or something, or like less susceptible to testosterone. And that's why I might be more feminine even without HRT. I don't actually know. Could just be genetics though, but I don't actually know.
An intersex individual is a person born with sex characteristics
But that being said, I don't think I'm intersex.
differ from the typical definitions of what it means to be male or female. Oftentimes, intersex individuals can have what they call ambiguous genitalia. So it's not, it doesn't fit that binary definition of like what a penis is and what a vagina is.
My whole life I've been taught this is what
Of
a
a
penis
goober.
looks like. This is what a vagina looks like. But when I was looking up intersex, it was like, oh, there's a spectrum. It's like
Yeah.
a whole anamorphs transition from penis to vagina.
I haven't quite heard it as an anamorph, but you know, I suppose it does kind of work. If you really think about it, you know, every penis that I'm sure you've seen looks different. You know, every vagina that you've seen looks different.
Every nose
Every
that I've
nose.
seen looks different.
Every nose,
Every
every eye
eyebrow.
color, eyebrow. Why not your genitalia as well? Your
Right.
chromosomes, your you know, hormones.
It's not a sexuality.
So it's interesting because, like I say in the beginning, it does completely cut through the idea that there is this rigid gender binary. And even conservatives have to concede that intersex people kind of blow a hole in their whole argument about, you know, the binary nature of male and female, and that biological sex happens to be on a spectrum and it is not a strict binary. Now, obviously, they try to spin that in such a way, like, oh, well, you know, it's such a small proportion of people that are intersex that, like, it doesn't even... First of all, how often are we testing for that? Second of all, if the point of these invasive and non-consensual genital surgeries on intersex people is to try to make it so that they can't actually tell if they're intersex or not, then how are they going to respond to surveys saying they are anyway? I'm sure the amount of people that are intersex in this country, any polls that have been done are probably undercounting. But the reason why they don't like it is because conservatism requires a hierarchy, right? I think there was a clip that came out some time ago from Jordan Peterson where he was like, if I can't tell if you're a man or a woman by face value, then how am I supposed to know if I'm supposed to respect you? You know, or some stupid shit like that. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but the meat of what he was saying is like, oh, how am I supposed to know if what you're talking to me about is worth my fucking time if I can't tell if you're a man or a woman? Because he's a misogynist. The reason why they need this gender binary is to enforce that hierarchy. They require the hierarchy. This is also why they're religious, because religion is inherently hierarchical in a lot of religions, where God is the ultimate top of the hierarchy, and then the people that claim to be the speakers of or envoys of God, i.e. the higher-ups in the church, are next in the hierarchy. And then you go down the list of the religious people, and then eventually you get to your average proletarian that happens to be religious. And then the father, or the husband, becomes the leader in that hierarchy. And then the woman, the wife, and the mother, and then the children, right? And then usually the boys are going to be put in higher level of import than the girls. because they require that hierarchy because they like that hierarchy. They seem to find benefit from keeping certain people down and elevating certain other people. And even in a secular sense, even in an atheistic sense, they still require that hierarchy between men and women, males and females, because we have lived in a patriarchal white supremacist system for a long time. We still do. There's a lot of systemic shit and changes that need to take place before we stop. This country was literally founded as a patriarchal white supremacist state, where only wealthy white men who owned land could participate in democracy, right? And the conservatives, Republicans in this country to this day are very excited to tell you that they want to go back to that. And this is also part of why they are so upset and so fundamentally triggered by trans people existing. Like, trans people existing makes them incredibly fucking butthurt to the point where they would torch their own careers in the name of their transphobia, because it throws a wrench into their idea of this gender binary, of that hierarchy. If you have a person who is assigned male at birth, who is male, and is benefiting from a variety of privileges for being male, and then they, because they understand themselves not to be a man, but to be a woman, in the views of, this bigoted right-winger that wants that hierarchy, throw away all those benefits to become a woman or somebody lower on the hierarchy, that's an affront to them. That's offensive to them. That's why the focus is almost entirely on trans women and not trans men. Like, trans men are infantilized and are just like, oh, these are just, lost sisters and wayward girls that are being propagandized to and blah, 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 blah. But when it comes to trans women, they're like, oh, shit, wait. We've literally constructed society to benefit men as much as possible, and you're not going to take advantage of that? Why are we doing this anyway? What's the point of having constructed all of this if people are willingly going against that? What the fuck? This is messed up. What? This can't be. And obviously a lot of this is fear as well of the other. A lot of this is disgust about things that they don't understand. But the baseline, very deep-rooted reaction that they have to it is based on the upset of that hierarchy. That hierarchy is what has allowed men, specifically white men, specifically wealthy white men, to have their position in every facet of society, have that additional leg up, and any upset to that is an upset to all hierarchies. If people understand that, oh, you can upset the hierarchy simply by dressing a different way, changing your name, using different pronouns, getting medical intervention. If you can upset the hierarchy in that way, well, then how else can you do it, right? And this is why a lot of trans people are also anti-capitalist, for instance, or feminists, for instance. The idea of being trans and going against the gender binary is an inherently anti-hierarchical position. Trans people, by and large, are not going to enjoy the idea of a hierarchy like that because they are actively going against it by their mere existence.
It's not a
Very
sexuality. It's not a gender identity.
True.
It's a variances of sex. I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. You're building a person, and 1 to 6 weeks, we all look alike.
The hell is
We're
that
gonna
thing?
have in our downstairs
Looks like a Pokemon.
area what's called
Charmander? The hell's that?
labial scrotal folds, which, like the name suggests, it could become either the labia or the scrotum. You have urogenital sinuses, which will become the vagina or elongate to an urethra. And you have a genital turbicle, which will be the penis
gotta
or
have the
clitoris.
turbicles.
In the Y chromosome, it's going to say, like, hey, internally, let's create like proteins that will build up, like differentiate your gonads. So the gonads, like what are gonads? It's either testes, like testicles, your balls.
Oh, thank you.
Or-
Now I get it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that one either. I was confused.
or ovaries. Once you have your testes, they will have two different cells that will create hormones. Testosterone will start to masculinize the downstairs region. But what about the inside now, right? Internally, we still have that thing that it looks like the same. So those parts will recede, but those were already inside your body. So for example, like, okay, you would have had a uterus if that part developed too, But now since it receded because you had those hormones inside, even like your body, like even though like completely male, you have what's called like a prostratic utricle, which is just a fancy name for small little pocket uterus. Like that's what
Have
women
a pocket uterus?
Gotta
You
have a pocket
Oh,
uterus.
hell yes!
Just
Yeah,
in
no
case.
idea.
Yeah,
A little bit of one.
A little bit of one too.
Okay.
So yeah, same with women. Women have what's called the female prostate or a Skene's gland. It's just much smaller, and that's like the secret to why some women could squirt and some others can't. Unlocking
Good to know.
secrets here.
Good to know. Now I know.
This is all like a very long-winded way to describe the idea of like we're all female first. And then eventually, because of your chromosomes, your body like uses those chromosomes as a blueprint to then give your body a variety of hormone washes while you're in the uterus to make the things happen in whatever direction they're going to happen, right? So if you've got the XY, like we're saying, instead of having ovaries develop, you're going to get testes. And then eventually the urethra, it extends so that you have the penis instead of the vagina and all this kind of stuff. And that's, I think, one of the major reasons why conservatives and the right in this country and around the world are so triggered, like deeply offended by medical intervention for trans people, is because the standards of care now, as we've had enough research and development on gender-affirming care, the hormones that you'll take as a part of HRT, either testosterone while suppressing estrogen, or estrogen while suppressing testosterone, that also blows a hole in the idea of the gender binary. Because when you're in utero, you get that hormone wash depending on your chromosomes, and then you get another hormone wash when you go through puberty, around whenever you're having that happen to you. It varies for different people, and that will also correspond to your chromosomes. But you could also have what a lot of people consider to be a third puberty, where if you happen to be trans and you're going on HRT, you will have a third hormone wash, kind of, in that you'll be suppressing the dominant hormone in your body as it corresponds to your chromosomes or whatever, and you'll be replacing it essentially with another one, which in my case would be estrogen. And that will start to make a variety of changes to your body that were always possible. Like, there's a very funny meme out there that every male has a genetically coded cup size for their booba that they will never know unless they go on HRT and on estrogen. Like, every single dude out there, if you're a man watching this, you have a cup size. You have a theoretical possible booba size, but you'll never know what it is unless you go on HRT. And that's very true, right? We can see estrogen and testosterone change a person's body in a variety of ways. If you're male, if you're on feminizing HRT, you're suppressing testosterone, you're getting on estrogen, your skin will thin and it'll often become drier. You'll be more susceptible to getting cold because of this, but your skin will also be smoother. Your chest will start breast and boobily. The pathways for breast milk development that would normally be forming in puberty for a female will start to form. And that's why when you go on feminizing HRT, your chest will be very sore over time. And then your fat distribution will change, and your fat will start, the new fat that you get will be deposited in different areas. Usually, it'll change in your face depending on what's going on with your genetics as well. Your fat distribution in your face will change, which can feminize your face even without any kind of plastic surgery. It'll go to your chest as well and start building up the shape of your breasts. It'll go to your legs, your hips, your posterior, and also, for some people, it depends. There are also changes that can happen to your genitalia. Your prostate can start to shrink. Your penis, if you don't keep up with it, and obviously there's always going to be differences depending on the person, can actually shrink, and some people say it can get bigger. But that's going to be primarily if you don't use it, right? Which for some people isn't a problem, for some people it is. That's why it's very individualized, right? Your testicles will often shrink as well, because the testosterone is what was keeping those in check. And then the inverse is going to be the case for people who are suppressing estrogen and replacing with testosterone. So transmasculine people, where your clitoris can enlarge substantially too. Like, you can look it up. There are images that people will post online about bottom growth when it comes to people on testosterone. A whole bunch of stuff. And obviously, I know more about the feminizing aspects. And this is all to say that this is all biological. This is all natural. This is all happening as a result of simply suppressing one hormone and replacing it with another. That's it. And all of these changes can happen. Because nothing I've talked about at this point has been surgery. It's all just been hormones. This is why Tucker Carlson on his program said that trans people are the natural enemy of Christianity. Now, obviously, that's not true. There are a lot of religious people out there that happen to be trans. But in Tucker Carlson's version of Christianity and the rigid hierarchy maintenance that Christianity does, they would then see trans people existing as a natural enemy to Christianity. The reason being, trans people upset the hierarchy. They upset all of the justifications for every single hierarchy that people who weaponize Christianity in order to push their bigotry need, and that's not good for them. That is a negative for them.
When you understand that part, you understand how intersex variations happen too. Say you have the proteins. What if you have like the building blocks and you're like, oh man, I ran out of like those blocks. I don't have enough to build the basement downstairs area.
Got it. Are you comfortable talking about how you deviate? Why you are considered intersex?
Well, I did not have those bricks.
Which bricks?
Not enough bricks.
Dude, which bricks? Specifically, there's a lot of bricks that happen.
I have no gonads at all.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called like gonadal agenesis.
My specific variation of intersex, which is androgen insensitivity syndrome.
Androgen insensitivity syndrome, meaning that testosterone don't do much for you. I don't think I have that, but I do think that my body is more sensitive to estrogen than testosterone.
So androgens, if you remember, are your sex hormones. So my body doesn't react to testosterone or estrogen.
Oh, so it's
because
both.
my body,
Okay, that makes sense. I think there is one where people will react more to one of the hormones over the other.
didn't respond to those sex hormones in the womb. None of my internal sex reproductive organs formed. So no fallopian tubes, no eggs, no uterus. What are the other things called? The things on the end.
The tube stuff.
Yeah, you know, right? You know it. Right?
Yeah, the egg drop stuff.
Isn't it bad to have neither? I think normally you're going to be supplementing for it if that's the case, or something. I don't actually know.
As a teenager, I just sort of was like, I felt different. Most women get their periods when they're 12, 13. I didn't. It's little things, but like, girls being like, can I borrow a tampon?
I think it's only androgens, testosterone. They're reactive to estrogen, which is why they develop as a female would. Wait, that's what I thought. But if it's both, they said it was both. Wait, okay. Because I always just correlate androgen to testosterone. Androgen insensitivity syndrome is when a person who is genetically male, who has one X and one Y chromosome, is resistant to male hormones called androgens. Okay, that's what I thought. That's why I was confused. As a result, the person has some of the physical traits of a woman, but the genetic makeup of a man. All right, so I was correct in the beginning. Thank God. I'm always right. That's true. That's real. That's why people will usually say for trans feminine people, they are estrogenized as a meme. And then for trans masculine people, they are androgenized. Because testosteronized is not as nice to say.
I was assigned female at birth because that's what I appeared at birth too. And it wasn't until puberty where stuff wasn't happening in the typical female way that they didn't, it didn't like click. I didn't go through like a normal puberty, so...
What did that look like? So you're like 12,
Very
13.
childlike.
So around 12, 13, people usually start going through puberty and you're like, someday it'll happen, but I don't know when.
Yeah, pretty much. Like even at 18, I looked like a child and my voice was very like, I don't know, picture like you put like a squirrel through a blender, right back. That's like very high-pitched voice.
Do you identify as male?
I identify as a guy, but I know I'm not male. I just say like, intersex guy.
Intersex guy?
I'm just kind of a dude, kind of a homie. You feel me?
Pronouns are like anything but she, so yeah, you could put he, they.
So based, except I use all of them, so I am more based, but still based.
Just don't call me she and we're fine.
I use she, they pronouns. I continue to use she because people will perceive me and see me as a feminine, a more feminine presenting person. I also use they, them pronouns because I feel like truly connected to my non-binary body.
I've heard people say intersexual. Like, is that an accurate term?
Yeah, there are many different like ways to say it. So you could be like an intersex person, you could be intersex, an intersexual. Some people before use the term hermaphrodite.
What is hermaphrodite? I don't even know if I can.
To be a hermaphrodite is just that you have the reproductive organs of both sexes, is my understanding, which is not always going to be accurate for intersex people. So
Say it. Is it okay for me to say it?
Is it a dirty word now?
How do you feel about the term?
I like the term. In English.
In English?
In Spanish, I feel like I have heard it more as a slur. Hermafrodita. Yeah, the English one too. Like sometimes my friends would joke and call me Herm.
it's kind of like calling trans people transvestites or something. It's like that kind of vibe, I think, when it's like used negatively.
I'm fine with that
And not
too.
the Greek god.
And not the Greek god too. And yeah.
We had a lot of difficulty finding intersex people for this episode,
Mm-hmm.
even though the statistics show that it's kind of a higher amount of intersex people than someone might imagine.
It depends on your definition and what you classify it.
It is estimated that up to 1.7% of the population has an intersex trait. Is that world population?
It's around like 2%. So it's a very sensitive topic for people just to openly be like, oh, hey, yeah, this is what I got going on downstairs.
Yeah.
But it's also just kind of the stigma that comes around of being an intersex person. I feel like the rates of like finding like intersex people would be much higher if we really did studies on everybody exactly, you know, because I feel like a lot of intersex people don't find out till later of life, if ever.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. This is why when I said earlier in the stream, it seems likely to me that any kind of polling we have when it comes to the population percentages of intersex people are probably going to be undercounted.
So some people watching right now could be technically intersex, but
Yeah.
be living a life where it doesn't affect them at all and they would never even know.
Yeah.
When did you find out that you were intersex?
It was sort of best practices again from the doctors to keep it a secret until I'm at an age where I can kind of comprehend what happened, which is 18, because I'm going to go to I'm going off to college and
I feel like that's so dumb. The idea that a person can't be given the education to understand what it means to be the person that they literally fucking are until they're 18 is ridiculous. So dumb. As long as you are a good educator, you should have no difficulty describing to this person, once they get to a certain age, what they are and how it affects them. Because, there are people that understand themselves to be trans when they're very young. Now, of course, they might not have the words for it. They might not have the education about what all those feelings mean. And eventually, when they do learn about those things, they're like, oh, shit, I think that's me. And then, you go through, as a youth anyway, you go through a whole fucking Rube Goldberg machine of talking to medical and mental health doctors, your parents, yourself. Ideally, you're in an affirming area where, people don't fucking abuse you for thinking you might be trans as a kid. And, you go from there. Conservatives love to hide things. Yeah, well, I mean, it's necessary to maintain the hierarchy to restrict access to education.
and I'm probably going to start having sex with boys. That never happened.
They were told that 18 is the
18.
age to tell someone.
Yeah,
Insane.
I started hormone replacement therapy at the age of 12.
And is that when you knew you're like, oh, I'm different and I need to take this so I fit in?
I knew I was different. My parents still didn't tell me why. It was still sort of shrouded in like you this is just a medicine that you need to take to stay healthy, and you don't really need to talk about it. I had
So what I'm speculating on here, and I don't know that this is the case for this person, I'm not going to say that this is the case for everybody. So for one, if a doctor is saying, oh, you should wait until they're 18 to tell them, that's fucking stupid, right? But I think for a lot of parents, there's going to be a kind of shame that they might feel about their child. Because usually what happens with the breeders out there is that they'll find out that the person who has the capacity to get pregnant is, and then they'll find out, okay, well, it's possible that we're going to have a boy or a girl. And they'll build up all these thoughts, feelings, and like projected futures for their would-be child. Like, oh my God, if he's a boy, then he might be able to go into sports and be a football player. If it's a girl, then she'll go into fucking, I don't know, something, because girls do things too. But we want the boy, usually, is unfortunately a lot of the cases for people, especially the fathers in that arrangement. And there'll be like a whole headcanon that parents will have for their child before the child is even born. And then as soon as the child is born and they find out that they're not the sex that they were hoping for, like, so they have a girl instead of a boy, or they have a boy instead of a girl, it's some bullshit. There's a lot of negative things that can come from that. And then if they find out that their kid is intersex, they're like, oh, well, for one, that's probably going to be the first time they ever heard about intersex being a thing that anybody could be, because this shit is not taught in school like it should be. And then two, once they learn about what that is from the doctors, then they'll be like, oh shit, well, this is not exactly what I was hoping for this mini me that I wanted, and it's going to involve a lot of different things that they're going to have to do. And parents will feel a kind of like shame or discomfort about that. And especially they will when talking to their friends or other family members, right? This is a big thing that happens when it comes to the parents of queer kids, or even queer adults, like the adult children that they might have that happen to be gay, for instance, let's say. So let's say there's a mother out there that has a son, and she's built up this entire headcanon of her son to go off and to get married to a beautiful woman and go into business and be this really cool businessman. And then all of a sudden, her son is actually gay, is trying to go get married to a handsome guy instead, and is actually into, fashion design, right? And then whenever they talk to their friends or family, like, oh, how's Johnny doing? Has he got a wife yet? What's going on there? And it's like, oh, no, my son's actually gay. Any kind of internalized or externalized homophobia they have will cause them to feel shame. The homophobia that may be internal, external for the person they're talking to about it might also have certain interactions happen. And it's just not good for anybody, because bigotry is not good for anybody. That happens a lot. This is also why it is very difficult for parents to accept that their child might be trans. The same headcanon will be built up about this child. The child is born not intersex, in this case, biologically male or female. And then eventually they find out, they have like this whole headcanon of, oh my God, little Cynthia, she's going to be a beautiful woman and she's going to get a husband and have children. And then it turns out that Cynthia is actually Christopher. And it's like, oh, see, what had happened was I had actually built up an entire fan fiction about the person that you are, because I was under the delusion that you were my property and extension of myself rather than your own, like, independent human being. And this doesn't sit right with me, because you were supposed to be Cynthia, you see. And that was the whole, like, we were putting you on that path. And obviously, depending on if the parent is transphobic or bigoted or whatever, they'll either end up abusing that kid verbally or physically, kick them out of the house. One of the reasons why youth homelessness for trans kids are very high. It's a lot of bad parents out there, yeah. And it's even a factor when it comes to non-bigoted and affirming parents as well. Because I think this is just a common thing that all parents do. They have, like, they're so excited about having a kid usually, and they're really excited about what the kid might become. And even in, like, the most positive of scenarios, they still have all these kinds of ideas of what their kid might do, these aspirations for the best life they want to see for their kid. Because generally speaking, if you're a good parent, you want your kids to have the best lives possible. And you'll be, before the kid is even born, thinking about how this all could be. Before the kid is old enough to start vocalizing their own opinions, thoughts, etc., they're still thinking about all this kind of shit. They're, like, dressing their kid a certain way, usually as it conforms to the gender binary. And even in, like, the positive scenarios, there's going to be, when that kid is like, yo, I'm actually trans, I'm not Cynthia, I'm Christopher, there's going to be, like, even in affirming positive parental scenarios, it's weird to say it, but a kind of mourning period, where they'll have this entire headcanon of Cynthia growing up to be a beautiful woman, and they're going to have to forget about all that, because that's not reality, that's not real, their child is actually Christopher. And all of that shit that they've been having going on in their head is now getting pushed away, because they understand, like, oh, my child, whom I love, who I want the best life for, says they're actually a trans man. And this entire headcanon that I have was not actually accurate. And there is going to be a period of time where, even in the most positive of scenarios, parents are going to react in a certain way. They might be, like, disappointed, for instance. They might feel upset. Even if they're affirming, even if they're very happy about it, they might slip up when it comes to using the right name or using the right pronouns. But it's all contextual to how they, end up dealing with that. Like if they say the wrong name, but then they correct themselves, or if they say the wrong pronouns, but then they correct themselves or get corrected, and they're like, oh shit, sorry, I'm trying, yada, yada, yada. There's just like a whole bunch of shit that happens there. So like even in the most positive of scenarios, that is likely to be a thing that happens with parents, because parents have all this time and have thought about a person a certain way for so long, and then eventually they find out that that wasn't accurate, and then they have to unlearn a whole bunch of shit and then learn about a bunch of new shit, right? Is it okay to feel guilty for breaking your parents' expectations? I mean, I don't know what kind of moral weight you're trying to assign to that. Like, children upset their parents all the time. And it doesn't even have to be like a very big thing like their gender identity or their sexuality. There are parents that will be disappointed if you go into a different career field than the one that they were excited about you potentially going into. Like if they want their son to be really into sports, but the son is just not into sports and it would rather go into like comp sci or some shit, or like fashion design. Ideally, the parents are still going to be supportive and try to like help that kid cultivate that as much as possible. But there's going to be a level of disappointment there. And there's also conversely going to be feelings that the kid is going to have about potentially disappointing their parents as well. But as long as everybody engages with those feelings in a positive and constructive capacity, it's not a problem. It only becomes a problem if people don't engage with it positively, if they don't engage with it constructively, if they engage with it negatively, if they respond with abuse and all this kind of shit.
Surgery at 2, which is when my parents found out they did the karyotype. They learned about my XY chromosomes. I had that surgery that removed those internal gonadal streaks, what they call them. I had another surgery when I was 12. That one was for cosmetic reasons. I mean, we could go into it, but it's a little intense.
Okay.
Like to
Only as much as you're comfortable with. Yeah.
Because it's so secretive and like it's shrouded in so much, like don't talk about it. It's like we don't actually know the exact parameters of the surgery either. It's like hard to get your medical records, and they might classify one thing as gonadal streaks when they could be fully undescended testes. It's just they're not documenting it correctly.
So you don't know exactly what was done?
Not exactly, no.
You don't know what was there and what's not anymore or anything.
And so that's another one of those, that's another part of like the trauma surrounding being intersex is like the so much unknown, and not knowing that is like, weird. It's like what was done to your body, it's like and losing that autonomy.
This is medical malpractice? Absolutely, yes. And it is born out of a feeling of shame, a feeling of fear and disgust of the unknown. If you allowed for study on intersex people, if you allowed for education on intersex people, you would not be having this much of a problem, right? Like, I'm sure there are instances where surgery is actually medically necessary, because the human body is fucking wild. But from what I hear about surgery when it comes to intersex infants, intersex kids, surgeries that are done without their consent, and in this instance, without even proper medical documenting, it's not good. It's fucked. And a lot of it is all done because of the conservative and reactionary fear response of the unknown. The wanting to maintain the strict gender binary between male and female just leads to hurting more people, not knowing a lot about a thing that happens, not even just with humans, but with other animal species as well. Which is interesting because those same right-wingers are currently on a crusade, sitting in their padded cell, surrounded by trans flags, like that meme of Miss Puff, focusing on the genitalia of children to an absurd and insane degree. Talking about, oh my god, they're mutilating and castrating kids, which is not happening. The majority of transition and gender-affirming care that trans youth, trans kids are going to have are going to be social transition, not medical. Like, for some reason, conservatives don't have the same energy for intersex kids having these surgeries done to them without their consent, which are not medically necessary. They don't have the same energy for circumcision. They don't have the same energy for female genital mutilation. And the only time they do is when they bring it up that, Islam majority countries end up doing it. And it's fucked then too. But they use it to be Islamophobic or whatever, right? Like, they don't have the same energy for it because they don't actually care about it. They don't care about protecting kids. They never have. But, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir on this one. I've said this a lot of times.
You don't remember the surgeries either?
No, I was 2 and 12. I remember being in the hospital for the second one. You know, you listen to your parents.
Yeah.
Especially I was the good kid too, so I'd listen to my parents. You know, this is what we're doing. You have to have this. Keeps you healthy.
The norm for like people who were born noticeably intersex at birth, the advice was like, oh, to save them from this social turmoil, let's reassign them to look either like male or female. First one
Which
is just
so fucked up, dude. To save them from this social turmoil. How about you fix the social turmoil, dumbass? Why are you trying to restructure a person's entire life to avoid that social turmoil instead of trying to systemically fix the social turmoil to begin with, which you would do with education, which you would do with not legislating bigotry and legislating away healthcare from people, which you would do by not disallowing kids to play in certain sports or disallowing people to use the bathrooms that they're comfortable with? How about you fix the social turmoil instead of trying to fix a person who doesn't need your fixing? Because it's harder to do that? Yeah, it is harder to do that. But I don't give a shit. There's a lot of difficult things that the human species has been able to achieve. In fact, I would imagine social change is going to be easier than like medical advancements. And we've had a lot of fucking medical advancements.
and it's just like, well, it's easier to like be like more female in this case, so it's like, oh, let's do that. Or like if you had like more of an opening that's like, oh, it's just a little close, then they do that close.
And that's non-consensual surgeries that are being performed on babies before they have any way to express how they feel.
And it's just so sad because like when you do surgery on an infant, scar tissue does not stretch like normal skin. So as a child is growing, things are tearing, you have continual surgeries, like, you know, like if you were to like lean towards male too, like it starts ripping apart, very painful.
What do you wish your parents would have known about intersex people before you were born?
I wish they knew that they had more than one choice, that it wasn't so scary for them to hear the options that they had and to have to make that choice.
You know what I find really interesting is how this compares to the conversation with trans people. So, you know, a kid might say, hey, you know, I'm 16, 17, 18, I want to get this surgery done to, you know, have my body look like how I feel it should. And there's a lot of discussion about, oh, I don't know, let's, you know, wait till you're older, even if you are 18, sometimes like wait till you're older. But yet, with intersex people, it seems almost the opposite, where it's like, well, this decision needs to be made. This decision needs to be made while you're still young because it needs to happen now so that it doesn't become a problem when you're older.
Yeah.
And
Both
also,
the
it needs to be done early so that we can lie to you throughout your life and give you justifications for why it happened, even though it didn't have to. We need to do it to the intersex child before they're old enough to understand what's happening. That's literally the point. And that's fucked.
intersex issues and transgender issues are both enforcing a binary, right?
Yeah.
So doctors are the same surgeries that intersex people are fighting against, trans people are fighting for. In these anti-trans legislations, you know, you'll see an addendum often for intersex people that'll say,
Yep.
you know, in cases of intersex, you know, these normalizing surgeries can
Because they
continue to
need
happen.
the gender binary and the hierarchical system of gender. Yup. The very baseline aspect of this conversation is bodily autonomy, is individual liberty, of being the owner of your own body and being able to make the decisions that you wish to make about it. That's what it is. And conservatives hate that. Conservatives hate when you have individual liberty to be the person that you want to be. Conservatives get so triggered when a human being takes ownership of their own body and through whatever choices they make, so long as they're not hurting anybody else, go against the preconceived notions that they had. They start fucking crying, ripping their hair out, screaming, frothing at the mouth. Why can't this person just stay within this rigid hierarchy that we've constructed? Why? Why can't you just be normal? It's the same for the bodily autonomy of women and people with the capacity to give birth, right? And abortion. It's the same thing. Conservatives, Republicans want to be able to control human beings. That's it. And any effort that people make to upset that fucking sends them into a death spiral.
I was 8, you know? So then it wasn't until I was 18 until I had to medically transition. But the whole reason that it took so long to like 18, if I knew like early in my teens, is that in Puerto Rico, where I grew up, all the doctors there would not like treat me for like hormone replacement therapy. They wanted to force me to go to take estrogen. I grew up in a religious town, so I felt like from my community, like even like when I would go down to town and like hold hands with my boyfriend, people would throw stuff at me. Very small town, but I can understand like where that comes from too, because it's like in religion we have like certain like, you know, you have rules, and sometimes those rules or your covenants and stuff have to do with they're gendered sometimes. But when you have a person who doesn't fit into, like, you don't know what category they go to, it's kind of scary, you know, to not know.
And it makes you wonder why so many trans people, so many queer people, I would imagine a lot of intersex people, just happen to not have the best view of religion. It really makes you wonder. It's almost like religion is used as a justification to maintain an unjust hierarchy, placing men at a higher level than women. And, you know, any deviance to that ends up getting punished socially and sometimes even in the law. Makes you wonder, why are queer people and the youth who are incredibly supportive of queer rights and becoming more and more socially progressive as time goes on also not being as religious anymore? I wonder.
So how did your parents react to all of this?
Well,
Probably
I
not
felt
well.
like I had to come out like 4 times.
Wait, what was the first time?
Well, one was like when I thought I was just trans. You
Okay.
know? My dad was like, "But you make such a pretty girl."
Oh, God.
Classic.
Yeah. My mom, bless her. Now I've come to the point where I've forgiven her too. But at the time, she said, "I would rather die than have a freak for a daughter."
Classic. That's called child abuse. What you're saying when you say that is you're telling your child that because your child happens to be the person that they are, and that somehow contradicts your expectations of them, that is an affront so severe that you would literally throw away your own life as a parent, should it be the case. That's what you're saying. Like, hey, child, if you are the person that you are, and I don't like that, you're killing me, essentially. So how about you don't do that? It's just abuse. It's the Matt Walsh line. Oh, yeah. No, Matt Walsh said the same thing. He'd rather die than have a trans kid.
The other that was like another like coming out to other people was like me being gay. Which is like a lot of people, they confuse a lot of people because it's like, if you were like a girl, wouldn't it be easier if you like guys? But I always explained it like who you are is not who you love. And then how people interact when like I come out like as intersex to my family too. It's, oh, that makes sense why, you know, all this. So I came out like gay, trans, intersex. I just wanted all the quote back.
You was like, I love coming out. I'm going to keep coming out.
There's not a script for what a whole intersex person can be. And so that's, you know, that can feel isolating. And I get that. And I do feel alone sometimes. But if you kind of flip that, it can be incredibly freeing to know that you are not bound to the binary patriarchal ways that society kind of thrusts you in from the moment that you're born. One of the original intersex organizations that I got connected to, and some of the first intersex people I met, is Interact. If I said something that you want to dig a little deeper on, it'll all be on Interact.
If you could say a message to your younger self when you were confused about what was going on with your body and your sexuality, do you think that you would have anything that you'd want to say?
Love yourself first, because once you have that self-love, the rest kind of falls in place. You're going to lose people, but the people that you would gain are so much more genuine that it makes up for the loss, you know?
Sorry, my brain is mush because I'm tired. It's a good video. I feel like I said a lot. Hell yeah. So basically, not affirming your queer kids is child abuse. And if you're a parent and you do not want to be abusing your child, you should not be a bigot. Keep it up. This video is kind of called as Return of the Pleb. Thanks so much for the support. Keep on keeping on. If you'd like to be the next Conure callout, all you can do is follow me on Twitter at ConureCC. Retweet my video links when they go live. Remember to subscribe to the channel, put all notifications on to the bell. Leave a like if you'd like. Comment something down below.